Hi, I'm Giles Hutchins, thought leader and advisor on applying living systems logic to our leadership and organizational development. So I've had 25 years now in business, formerly as a management consultant with KPMG, helping all sorts of organizations around the world transform, where I ran the practice around business transformation. And then I became global head of sustainability for the multinational IT services company Atos Origin, where I worked with a company 160,000 strong in 40 countries. And then I developed an approach called Firms of the Future and learning from living systems to help our organizations transform. I left corporate life in 2012 after publishing my first book, The Nature of Business, where I explored how we take learning from living systems and apply that to our organizations. Since then, I've published 3 other books. So after The Nature of Business came The Illusion of Separation, a more philosophical exploration into our relationship with living systems and nature. And then Future Fit, how our organizations and leaders become future fit by taking inspiration from living systems. And my latest book, co-authored with Laura Storm, is Regenerative Leadership, where we explore learning from living systems applied through the regenerative DNA to help our organizations become life-affirming in these increasingly volatile times. So what are we facing today? Well, we're facing immense challenges post-COVID. It's a challenging yet exciting time to be a leader. So much we thought we knew about how to lead and operate is open for question. Profound shifts are affecting the way we work, how and why we do things, and the purpose and meaning that we bring to our organizations, our social systems, and our wider civilization. And the more that we can notice that what underpins these challenges today is an underlying shift in awareness, the more that we can actually deal with root causes as well as downstream effects. So the challenges that we face, and our children unfortunately will face as they grow up in this increasingly fragmented and fragile world, are as a result of this mechanistic thinking. So whether it be Black Lives Matter movement, whether it be the pandemic, COVID, whether it be climate change, or whether it be rising mental health issues in the workplace, all of these systemic challenges find their underlying root in this shift from a mechanistic, control-based, narrowing down, reductive perspective, which so much of our managerial thinking is inured in today, to a recognition of the interconnections, a shift into what I refer to as the logic of life, taking inspiration from living systems rather than a mechanistic, machine-based way of thinking. And that shift helps our organizations not just survive, but thrive in the volatile times ahead. And in my coaching work with senior leaders, I find that actually what leaders are challenged with today is this tension between survival and thrival, keeping the wheels on the road amidst increased volatility, and exploring how we help our organizations transform amidst these volatile times. And right at the heart of this transformation is this shift in logic, the shift in way of thinking from essentially mechanistic, control-based thinking to opening up to how life is, a more emergent, a more life-affirming and regenerative approach. So that's what we explore in the books I've written and the papers I've written. And in terms of how that relates to biomimicry, biomimicry, if we look at the word biomimicry, comes from the 2 Greek words bios, means life, and mimicry. And mimicry has sort of 2 levels to it. And the first level, it's on face value, copying, mimicking something. If you look at the original Greek meaning of mimesis, where mimicry comes from, then it's more than just an immediate copying. It's actually an embodying. It's an attunement. It's emulating the genius within something by attuning and finding your genius and being in accord with it. So there's a lot more in that than purely copying a design process. It's about how do we find our own true nature and how do we attune with the inherent grammar we find within life, the wisdom of nature. And so the work that I do draws upon traditional biomimicry, copying patterns and principles and design, and draws upon more of the adult developmental psychology to help us open up to life beyond mechanistic thinking. So what I explore in regenerative leadership with Laura Thorne, my co-author, is 3 levels where we can apply biomimicry. At 3 levels. One is around living systems design, the other around living systems culture, and the third around living systems being. So living systems design is where we traditionally find biomimicry, industrial ecology, circular economics, cradle to cradle, and so forth, where we apply insights from living systems to how we design our products, our processes, and our places. And there are plenty of examples out there, which I wrote about in my first book, and we also talk about extensively in Regenerative Leadership. All sorts of examples. There's a whole revolution going on in the design space where we take insights from life and apply those to our products, processes, and places. Particularly interesting is when we apply them to more around human processes. So for instance, Interface's work, the carpets company, with the initiative Factory as a Forest, which the Biomimicry Institute has been involved with, where we take learning from living systems and apply that not just to the factory, not just to the machinery and designing things more effectively, but the way in which that factory interrelates with its suppliers, its customers, and its wider ecosystem. So the forest, so the factory overall reduces the amount of carbon it gives off and actually starts to absorb, starts to sequester carbon like a forest. So that's a very interesting example of what we're seeing in business, insight from living systems at the design level. Another area at the design level is where we take insight from living systems and apply that to our economics, apply that to the way in which we structure our social systems. So donut economics, the work of Kate Raworth, the economist, has taken insight from living systems and then applied that to the city level. Amsterdam, for instance, is now applying donut economics, and Copenhagen is exploring that too. So then we apply this living systems approach, a more holistic approach to our economics, to shift us away from a mechanistic perspective. Also, you can see design from nature being applied to our education processes. Been recently working with Richard Dunn here, came to the land here at my place at Springwood Farm, where he is a head teacher of a primary school that has won awards on taking learning from living systems and applying that to how they educate children in brilliant ways. So that's around design, where we take patterns and principles from nature and we apply that to how we design things, whether it be our products, our architecture, or our educational or economic systems. Then there is living systems culture. Now that's slightly different. That's where in seeing our cultures, our organizations, our social systems, our communities, rather than as machines, things to be managed and controlled through hierarchies of power and control, we recognize that they are complex adaptive systems of human relationships that are also interfacing with more than human relationships, the natural world. And then we take a more holistic perspective and we try and encourage those cultures to become more developmental and more evolutionary. Again, both of those qualities bringing insight in from nature and how nature works in its evolutionary and emergent process. So, for instance, the work I do with leaders is we look at qualities of living systems like divergence and diversity and convergence and purpose and bringing together to create emergence in the organizations. And I've had the pleasure of working with all sorts of organizations, and many of them we mention in the book Regenerative Leadership, where we've been taking insights from living systems to help our organizations become more future fit, more life affirming. Toast Ale, for instance, a small brewery here in the UK, an award-winning and now international brewery, where they work at transforming the movement around food waste. So they're contributing to a system change and yet providing high-quality products in the processes, reducing food waste, actually taking waste bread in their brewing process, and also looking at the culture of their organization, how they can become more purposeful, more self-organizing, and more values-led. Right the way through to multinationals that I've had the pleasure of working with, and real leading brands. For instance, Pucker Herbs, who provides herbal teas around the world. I work with their leadership team to take inspiration from living systems and apply that to how we can enliven the organization. And I'm currently working with a big finance company, a multi-billion-dollar organization, to again take inspiration from living systems and enable them to self-organize and adapt and evolve in these times of fast-moving change post-COVID into new ways of working. Then the third level is living systems being. Now, this is a quality of being. It's a quality of leadership consciousness that we can develop by being in nature or tuning with nature's wisdom. And that's the work I do when I take leaders out into nature. So we have 60 acres of ancient woodland here, just outside London, specifically designed for taking leaders into nature so that we can open up and shift our developmental consciousness and bring a different quality of consciousness to our solutions than which created the problems in the first place. So that's where the real work of shifting from a mechanistic way of thinking into living systems thinking happens on the ground. And in these nature immersions, we take insight from living systems, we connect with nature, and we merge in and open up in dialogue with others around the fire. Deep listen to what's really going on below the surface. And this is a shift in consciousness that helps us really open up to more creative, vibrant ways of operating. I've had CEOs, for instance, from organizations literally crying when we are connected round the trees because we've had the opportunity to open up and really share what's going on in our organizations and see what really therefore needs to happen going forward. So nature and tuning to nature can happen at three levels: living systems design, designing products, processes and places more effectively and more sustainably; living systems culture, designing our organizations in ways that create life-affirming futures that enable us to become more of who we truly are, and in so doing, serve life more effectively and create futures that we are proud of and that help the life of our children's and children's children's. And third, living systems being, a quality of being that enables us to shift and see things differently from a mechanistic lens into a living systems lens. So those are the three levels that we can apply biomimicry in its truest essence to help us shift towards a more life-affirming future. I would like to conclude really by saying that biomimicry is really a powerful tool in today's world. But let's not limit it to just copying designs from nature. Let's also open it up into taking insight from living systems at all levels, our own psychology as well as biology, our own adult developmental consciousness, as well as attuning with the consciousness of nature around us. And what we do in the book Regenerative Leadership is explore these three levels of living systems design, culture, and being by bringing them alive, not only with business examples, but insights from living systems, so that we can create regenerative futures. Thank you very much.